Captain Yanari stood on the bridge of the Serenity's Promise and watched her crew die slowly. The air recyclers had failed 3 days ago. The backup systems lasted 12 hours before they too went silent. Now, 847 souls breathed thin, stale air that grew thinner with each passing hour. Her species, the Volanti, were tall and graceful beings. Their bones were like crystal, and their skin glowed with soft light when they felt strong emotions. Right now, every Volanti on the ship glowed a dim, fearful blue. They were afraid. Yanari was afraid too, but she kept her light steady. A captain must never show fear. The research vessel had been studying the Kethra Nebula when the accident happened. A power surge had destroyed the main reactor. The explosion killed 60 crew members instantly and left the ship drifting in the cold darkness between stars. They had no engines. They had no power. They had no hope. Yanari looked at the communication officer, a young male named Thiessen, whose glow flickered like a dying candle. He had been trying to reach Galactic Concord emergency services for 3 days. The nearest outpost was 3 weeks away at standard travel speed. Help would never arrive in time. "Captain," Thiessen said, his voice weak, "we have perhaps 6 hours of breathable air remaining. Maybe 8 if we seal off the lower decks and let those sections go cold." Yanari closed her eyes. Seal off the lower decks. That meant abandoning 200 crew members to suffocate in the dark while the rest lived a few hours longer. She could not do that. She would not do that. "There is another option," said her first officer, Morath. He was older than Yanari, his crystal bones yellowed with age, his glow steady and calm. "We could send a general distress call. All frequencies. All directions." The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to look at Morath as if he had suggested setting the ship on fire. General distress call was against every protocol of the Galactic Concord. Distress signals were supposed to go only to registered member species through secure channels. Broadcasting on all frequencies meant anyone could hear. Anyone could respond. Pirates, slavers, hostile species that had never signed the peace treaties, or worse, things from the unknown regions. Things that the Concord had marked on their maps with simple warnings. Do not enter. Do not respond. Do not engage. "We cannot," Thiessen whispered. "The regulations clearly state that the regulations will not save us," Morath interrupted. "In 6 hours, we will all be dead. Our bodies will drift in this nebula forever. Our families will never know what happened to us. Is following protocol worth that price?" Yanari looked around her bridge. She saw scientists who had joined this mission to study stars. She saw engineers who had families waiting for them back home. She saw young officers at the beginning of their careers and old veterans who had served for centuries thought none of them deserved to die here. "Do it," she said. "Send the general distress call." Thiessen hesitated for only a moment. Then his fingers moved across the console. The ship's remaining power, barely enough to keep the lights on, was redirected to the communication array. A signal burst out from the Serenity's Promise, traveling at the speed of light in every direction. It was a simple message. A dying ship. 800 souls. Coordinates. A plea for help from anyone who could hear. The signal traveled through the Kethra Nebula, past dead stars and empty space. It crossed the border of Concord territory and kept going. It entered a region that appeared on no official maps, a place marked only as Quarantine Zone 7. In the archives of the Galactic Concord, there was almost no information about this zone. The warning was over 4,000 years old. No one remembered who had placed it there or why. Some historians believed it was left by the precursors, the ancient civilization that had built the jump gates and then vanished long ago. Others thought it was simply a mistake, a bureaucratic error that no one had bothered to correct. But the warning was clear. Do not enter. Do not respond. Do not engage. No Concorde vessel had ever entered quarantine zone 7. No Concorde vessel had ever returned a signal from that region. For 4,000 years, it had been silent, empty, dead. Until now. Deep in the darkness of that forbidden space, something ancient detected the distress call. It was not a computer, though it thought faster than any computer ever built. It was not alive, though it had once been human. It was something in between, a guardian left behind by a people who had chosen to disappear. The guardian analyzed the signal. The Lanthi language. Research vessel. Reactor failure. Estimated survival time, 6 hours. Crew complement, 840-7. For 3,000 years, the Guardian had followed its orders. It had remained silent. It had not responded to anything. It had let the galaxy forget that anything existed in this region of space. But its orders had one exception. One condition that would override everything else. If someone called for help, the Guardian would answer. The Guardian sent its own signal deeper into the zone, to the place where the last humans lived. The message was simple. Someone needs us. On a world hidden behind clouds of sensor-blocking dust, lights began to turn on. Engines that had not fired in centuries began to warm. Ships that looked more like nightmares than vessels began to rise from their docks. And in the halls of the human colony, people who had sworn never to reveal themselves to the galaxy again began to prepare. Back on the Serenity's promise, Yenari sat in her command chair and waited. The air grew thinner. The lights grew dimmer. Her crew's glow faded from blue to gray, the color of despair. She did not expect anyone to come. She had sent the signal because doing something was better than doing nothing. But she did not truly believe that help would arrive. 3 days passed. 3 days of rationing every breath. 3 days of watching crew members fall unconscious and not wake up. 3 days of hope dying slowly. On the morning of the 4th day, when Yenari herself could barely stay awake, when the ship had fallen so silent that she could hear her own heartbeat, the proximity sensors screamed to life. Something was coming. Something had heard them. And as Yenari looked at the sensor display and saw the shape emerging from folded space, she felt something she had not felt in days. She felt hope. She also felt fear. Because whatever was coming was huge. It was dark. And it was nothing like anything the Galactic Concorde had ever seen. Help had arrived. But Yenari was no longer certain that help was what she wanted. Captain Yenari did not follow Commander Reyes's advice. She could not. When the Serenity's promise returned to Concorde space, officials immediately noticed that a ship which should have been destroyed was now in perfect working condition. They demanded answers. Yenari gave them. Within days, the story spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A Volanthi vessel had been saved by beings from the quarantine zone. Beings who called themselves humanity. Beings who had been hiding in forbidden space for thousands of years. Beings who built ships like nightmares and repaired reactors in hours instead of months. The Galactic Concorde was a union of over 400 species. They had kept peace among the stars for 10,000 years. They had rules for everything, protocols for every situation, treaties covering every possible conflict. But they had no rules for this. They had no protocol for ghosts emerging from forbidden space. The Concorde Council demanded contact. They sent a diplomatic fleet of 50 ships to the edge of Quarantine Zone 7. They broadcast messages on all frequencies, asking the humans to respond. They waited for 3 weeks, growing more nervous each day. Then the humans answered. A single small vessel emerged from the zone and approached the fleet. It was tiny compared to the nightmare ship Yenari had described, barely larger than a shuttle. But every weapon on every Concorde ship tracked it as it approached. The vessel docked with the flagship. A single human came aboard. She walked into the diplomatic chamber where representatives of all 400 Concord species waited. She wore no armor, just simple gray clothing. She was small and thin, with pale skin and hair the color of fire. She looked around at the gathered aliens, beings with scales and fur and crystal bones. Beings with wings and claws and too many eyes, and she showed no fear. "I am Ambassador Chun," she said in perfect Concord standard, the common language of the galaxy. "I speak for the remaining human people. You have questions. I will answer them." The Volanthi representative spoke first. "Why did you hide from us? Why did no one know you existed?" Ambassador Chun smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone about to deliver terrible news. "We hid because we were afraid of what we might do to you," she said. "Let me tell you about my species." For the next 3 hours, Ambassador Chun spoke. She told the history of humanity without pride, without shame, without emotion of any kind. She spoke like a doctor describing a disease. She told them about Earth, the human homeworld. She told them about humanity's constant wars, their endless conflicts over resources and territory and ideas. She told them about weapons that could destroy cities in seconds, poisons that could kill millions, machines built only to end lives as efficiently as possible. "We turned every advancement into a weapon first and a tool second," she said. "When we discovered fire, we used it to burn our enemies. When we discovered metal, we made swords. When we discovered atoms, we made bombs that could crack the world itself." The chamber was silent. 400 species listened in growing horror. "We nearly destroyed ourselves 17 times, Chun continued. 17 times we came to the edge of extinction because of our own violence. We always pulled back at the last moment. We always found a reason to stop." She paused. "The 18th time, we did not stop." She described the final war. It lasted only 6 days. When it ended, Earth was a burned, poisoned wasteland. 99% of humanity was dead. The survivors, scattered across early colonies on other worlds, looked at what they had done and felt horror beyond words. "We were monsters," Chun said. "We knew we were monsters. So we made a choice. We gathered our survivors. We collected every ship, every piece of technology, every weapon we had left, and we disappeared into the darkness." The Crathini ambassador, a warrior from a species famous for never losing a battle, leaned forward in his seat. He was huge and covered in armor like scales, with 4 arms ending in sharp claws. "You quarantined yourselves," he said slowly. "You did not hide because you feared us. You hid because you feared what you would do to us." "Yes," Chun said simply. "Then why emerge now?" The Crathini asked. "Why reveal yourselves after all this time?" Chun was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Because someone called for help," she said. "Captain Yanari and her crew were dying. They sent a signal into the dark, hoping someone would hear. We heard, but your laws," another ambassador said. "Your self-imposed exile. You broke it for one ship." Chun looked directly at the speaker. Her eyes were hard. "We broke it because letting people die when we could save them would make us the monsters we were trying not to be. We failed our own people. We failed our own world. We will not fail strangers who call to us in the dark." The chamber erupted in chaos. Species began arguing with each other. Some demanded the humans be destroyed before they could threaten the galaxy. Others wanted to welcome them as allies. Others simply wanted to know more. Through it all, Ambassador Chun stood calmly, waiting. Finally, the Volanthi representative asked the question that everyone was thinking. "If you fought among yourselves so terribly, if you destroyed your own world, how can we trust you not to destroy ours?" Chun's smile returned, sad and tired. "You cannot," she said. "We do not ask for your trust. We do not ask for your friendship. We do not ask for anything. We simply came to tell you the truth. We exist. We have been watching. And if you ever call for help, we will come." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "But I hope you never need to call," she said. "Because if you call us, it means something terrible has happened. It means you have no other choice. And we do not know if we can stop being monsters once we start fighting again." She walked out. Her shuttle departed. The diplomatic fleet returned to Concord space, and the galaxy began to argue about what to do with the ghosts called humanity. The ship that emerged from folded space did not look like a ship. It looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare and decided to fly through the stars. It was black, so black that it seemed to swallow the light around it. Its shape was all wrong angles and sharp edges, covered in structures that the Volanthi computers could not identify. And it was enormous. The Serenity's promise was a large vessel, built to carry almost 1,000 crew members across the galaxy. But compared to this new ship, it was like a small fish swimming next to a whale. The stranger's vessel could have swallowed them whole and still had room for a dozen more. Yanari's remaining crew gathered on the bridge, those who could still stand. Their glows flickered weakly as they stared at the sensor display. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. "Captain," Tayson whispered, his voice cracking, "I am searching the Galactic Concord database. There is no match. This ship design does not exist in any of our records. Not from any known species. Not from any era of galactic history." Yanari nodded slowly. She had expected as much. Whatever had come from Quarantine Zone 7 was not something the Concord had ever encountered. Then the communication console lit up. Someone was trying to contact them. "Audio only," Tayson reported. "They are not showing video." "Put it through," Yanari said. A voice filled the bridge. It spoke in perfect Volanthi, every word clear and properly pronounced. But something about it was strange. The accent was old, using forms of speech that Yanari had only heard in historical recordings. "We received your distress call," the voice said. "We are here to help. Do you consent to rescue?" Yanari felt cold spread through her body. Her species had only developed their current language about 2,000 years ago. It had evolved from older forms, changing slowly over centuries like all living languages. The accent this stranger used had not been spoken for at least 1,500 years. That meant whoever was speaking had learned the Volanthi language recently. They had studied it, probably from intercepted communications. They had learned it specifically so they could speak to her right now. What kind of beings prepared so carefully for a rescue mission? What kind of beings had been listening to Concord communications for centuries without ever revealing themselves? "Captain?" Morath asked quietly. "What do we do?" Yanari looked at her dying crew. She looked at the air quality readings, which showed they had perhaps an hour of breathable atmosphere left. She thought about her family back home, her children who were waiting for her to return. "We consent," she said. "Please help us." There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Docking procedures will begin shortly. Please remain calm. We mean you no harm." Within minutes, a smaller vessel detached from the massive ship. It approached the Serenity's promise and connected to one of the emergency airlocks. Yanari gathered her security officers, those few who could still stand, and went to meet their rescuers. The airlock opened with a hiss of fresh, clean air. Yanari took a deep breath without thinking, and the pure oxygen made her dizzy after days of breathing thin, stale atmosphere. Figures stepped through the airlock. They were humanoid in shape, standing on 2 legs, with 2 arms and a head at the top. But that was where the familiarity ended. They wore armor that covered every part of their bodies, sealed tight with no gap or opening. The armor was the same impossible black as their ship, and it seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. They moved with perfect efficiency, not wasting a single motion. Yet there was something organic about them too. Something in the way they tilted their heads slightly when looking at the Volante. Something almost curious in their body language. "I am Commander Reyes," one of them said through their helmet speaker. The voice was the same one from the communication. "We will repair your vessel. Please direct your crew to the medical bay. We will provide clean air and medical assistance." Yanari hesitated. "You can repair our ship?" "Our engineers said the reactor was destroyed beyond recovery. They said we would need a shipyard and months of work." Commander Reyes tilted their head again in that curious way. "Your engineers were wrong. We can repair it. It will take approximately 9 hours. 9 hours. Yanari's chief engineer had said the damage would take 6 months to fix at a proper facility. She did not know whether to feel grateful or terrified. Over the next 9 hours, Yanari watched the strangers work. They moved through her ship like ghosts, quiet and precise. They brought equipment that seemed to reshape metal with light. They rebuilt systems that had been completely destroyed. They never stopped to rest, never stopped to eat, never showed any sign of fatigue. Her crew stayed out of their way, too weak and too frightened to do much else. The strangers provided oxygen generators that filled the ship with clean air. They gave out small packages of food that tasted strange but provided energy. They treated the injured with medical technology that healed wounds in minutes. And through it all, they never removed their helmets. They never showed their faces. When the 9 hours were over, Commander Reyes came to find Yanari on the bridge. All the systems around them were online and functioning. The lights were bright. The air was clean. The engines hummed with power. "Your vessel is repaired," Reyes said. "You can resume your journey whenever you wish." Yanari looked at the commander, at that featureless black helmet that revealed nothing. She had to ask. She had to know. "Who are you?" She said. "What species are you? Why did you come to help us? Why were you hiding in the quarantine zone? Why does no one know you exist?" There was a long silence. The commander stood perfectly still, like a statue. Then, slowly, Reyes reached up and removed the helmet. The face beneath was strange to Volante eyes. Soft skin in shades of brown. No crystal bones, no glowing light. 2 small eyes, a nose, a mouth. Hair on top of the head, dark and cut short. It was a surprisingly delicate face, with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. Several of Yanari's officers made sounds of surprise. This being looked weak. This being looked fragile. How could something so soft build ships so dark and terrible? "We are what remains," Commander Reyes said. Her voice was quiet now, tired somehow. "We are humanity, and we came because you called for help." Reyes put her helmet back on and turned to leave. At the airlock, she paused. "Tell no one you saw us," she said. "For your own sake. Some things are better left forgotten." Then she was gone. The small vessel detached and flew back to the massive ship. Within minutes, the stranger's vessel folded space around itself and vanished, leaving no trace that it had been there. Yanari stood on her bridge, surrounded by her living crew, breathing clean air, and felt more afraid than she had when she was dying. Humanity. She had never heard that name before, but something told her that she would never forget it. For 2 years, the Galactic Concord argued about humanity. Every species had an opinion. Every opinion was different. The Kruthni warriors wanted to test themselves against these legendary fighters. The Volante scientists wanted to study human technology. The Marth merchants wanted to open trade. Smaller species hoped humanity would protect them from larger ones, but many more were afraid. They had heard Ambassador Chun's words. They had listened to her describe the final war, the burned earth, the billions of dead. They did not want these monsters anywhere near their worlds. The arguments might have continued for centuries. The Concord was slow to make decisions. They had rules and protocols and treaties that required careful consideration. Then, the Void Swarm attack. No one knew where the Void Swarm came from. They had appeared at the edge of the galaxy 3 centuries ago, a vast machine intelligence that consumed everything in its path. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply arrived, stripped worlds of all resources, and moved on. The Concord had been fighting them for 300 years. They had lost over 200 worlds. They had never won a single major battle. On the day that changed everything, the Void Swarm came to Concord Station Prime. Station Prime was the heart of the Galactic Concord. It was the largest structure ever built, a massive ring that circled a small star. 12 billion beings lived there. It was home to the Concord Council, the great libraries, the central banks, the cultural treasures of 400 species. And the Void Swarm sent 1,000 ships to destroy it. The Concord defense fleet was large, over 500 vessels. They fought bravely. They formed lines and launched missiles and fired their weapons until their batteries were empty. They died screaming. The Void Swarm ships were not affected by normal weapons. They absorbed energy attacks and rebuilt themselves when physical projectiles hit them. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands of ships acting as one mind. Within 3 hours, the defense fleet was destroyed. The station's shields were failing. 12 billion people prepared to die. And then the sky tore open. Space itself seemed to fold and twist as ships emerged from nowhere. Not dozens of ships, not hundreds. Thousands upon thousands of vessels poured out of folded space, appearing in waves that blocked out the stars. They were black. They were angular. They were nightmares given form. Humanity had come. The human fleet did not hesitate. They did not form lines or wait for orders. They simply attacked, driving into the Void Swarm like a blade into flesh. The weapons they used were unlike anything the Concord had ever seen. Beams of light that did not just destroy ships but seemed to unmake them, breaking them down into atoms. Missiles that created small black holes, swallowing enemy vessels whole. Ships that moved faster than should have been possible, weaving through enemy fire like shadows, and the humans themselves fought like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. They showed no fear. They showed no hesitation. They threw their ships at the enemy without any apparent concern for their own survival. One human cruiser, madly damaged and venting atmosphere, accelerated directly into the largest Void vessel. The resulting explosion destroyed both ships and took 12 more swarm vessels with them. The crew had not tried to escape. They had not sent distress calls. They had simply aimed for the biggest target and pushed their engines to maximum. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Human ships fought past the point where any sane being would retreat. Human crews died by the thousands, and more ships kept coming to take their place. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Void Swarm fleet was gone. Not retreating gone. Every single enemy ship had been destroyed. The wreckage drifted in clouds of metal and fire around the station. The humans had lost almost 300 ships. Tens of thousands of their people were dead. They did not celebrate. Communication came through the Station Prime. An older human male appeared on screen. He wore a simple uniform with no medals or decorations. His face was tired, his eyes sad. "I am Admiral Vasquez," he said. "The threat has been eliminated. You are safe." The Concord officials did not know what to say. They had just witnessed the complete destruction of an enemy that had been unbeatable for 3 centuries. They had watched humans die in waves to protect strangers. Why? One official finally asked, "Why did you come? Why did you sacrifice so many of your people for us?" Admiral Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. "We did not want to be this anymore," he said finally. "When we went into exile, we built something new. We made art and music and philosophy. We raised children who never learned to hate. We taught ourselves to be peaceful, to be gentle, to be everything we had never been." His voice grew heavier. "We thought we had finally become what we always should have been. We thought the monsters were gone." He looked directly into the camera. "But you called for help. And we remember what we are, what we have always been. When our children are in danger, when innocent people are dying, we become the thing we fear. We become weapons. We become death." He paused. "This is our curse. We cannot stop being monsters, but we can choose what we are monsters against." The transmission ended in the wreckage of the battlefield. Human ships began collecting their dead. They did not ask for thanks. They did not ask for payment. They simply gathered their fallen and prepared to go home, and across the galaxy. Billions of beings looked at the humans with new eyes. They were still afraid. They were still uncertain. But now, mixed with the fear, there was something else, gratitude. And perhaps, just a little bit, hope. After the battle, everything changed. The Void Swarm, which had been slowly consuming the galaxy for 3 centuries, suddenly stopped advancing. They pulled back from Concord space. They retreated to the outer rim and went quiet. No one knew if they were regrouping or simply afraid. The Galactic Concord no longer argued about whether humanity was a threat. They argued about something else now. What exactly were the humans, and how did they become this way? The Concord opened their sealed archives. Not the public records that any citizen could access, but the ancient vaults that contained secrets from before the Concord existed. These were the records of the precursors, the civilization that had built the jump gates and then vanished 12,000 years ago. What they found changed everything. The precursors had not simply vanished. They have been destroyed. 12,000 years ago, humanity made first contact. They were young then, barely starting to explore beyond their own solar system. They were curious and eager to meet other beings. The precursors were ancient and powerful. They had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had seen countless species rise and fall. When they looked at humanity, they saw something that frightened them. They saw potential. They saw a species that adapted faster than any other. They saw beings who could learn anything, build anything, become anything. And they saw the violence at humanity's core, the constant wars, the endless conflict. The precursors decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. They tried to destroy them. They sent their fleets to Earth. They burned human colonies. They hunted human ships through the stars. They were confident that their superior technology would ensure a quick victory. They were wrong. The war lasted 3 centuries. Humanity should have lost. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Their technology was primitive compared to the precursors. They had no allies, no resources, no advantages, but they refused to die. Humanity adapted. They learned. They stole precursor technology and improved it. They fought with a ferocity that shocked their enemies. They turned every defeat into a lesson, and every lesson into a weapon. In the end, the precursors were gone. Not just defeated, erased from existence. Their worlds were destroyed. Their stations were broken. Their people were dead. Only their infrastructure remained, the jump gates and communication networks that the Concord still use today. Humanity, broken and bleeding and reduced to a fraction of their original population, looked at what they had done. They had killed an entire civilization. They had wiped out a species that had existed for millions of years, and they felt horror beyond words. That was when they made their choice. They would not be weapons anymore. They would not be monsters. They would disappear into the darkness and never let the galaxy see them again. The quarantine zone was not a prison. It was a promise. Humanity was not hiding from the galaxy. They were protecting it from themselves. This was the truth that horrified the Concord. The humans had not just defeated the precursors. They had ended an entire civilization. And then they had voluntarily locked themselves away because they were afraid of their own power. Captain Yanari, the Volanthe whose distress call had started everything, spent months among the humans after the battle. She was welcomed as a guest in their hidden colony, allowed to see how they lived, how they raised their children, how they tried every day to be something other than what their history said they were. When she returned to Concord space, the council asked her to report. She stood before the assembled representatives of 400 species and spoke. "I asked Admiral Vasquez why they came to help us," she said. "I asked why they risked becoming the monsters they tried so hard not to be. Why they sacrificed their people for strangers who might hate them." The council waited. "He told me something I will never forget," he said. "We heard children crying in the dark. And no matter what we have become, no matter what we have done, we cannot bear the sound of children crying." Yanari paused. Her crystal bones glowed with emotion, not fear, not anger, but something more complex. "That is what horrifies me, counselors," she continued. "It is not their weapons. It is not their history. It is not even the fact that they destroyed the precursors." She looked around the chamber. "What horrifies me is that they are monsters, and they choose, every single day, to be gentle anyway. They choose mercy when extinction would be easier. They choose to save species who would gladly see them destroyed. They choose to protect children who are not their own." A Krethni warrior spoke up. "How can monsters choose to be good? Either they are monsters or they are not." Yanari shook her head. "That is what you do not understand. That is what none of us understood. The humans believe that everyone is a monster. Every thinking being has the capacity for terrible violence. What matters is not what you are capable of, it is what you choose to do with that capacity." She stepped forward. "The galaxy is not horrified because humanity is evil. The galaxy is horrified because humanity is good, and we have absolutely no idea what to do with that." The council fell silent. Over the following years, humanity slowly began to emerge from their exile. They did not join the Concord. They did not ask for territory or resources or power. They simply existed, a quiet presence at the edge of the galaxy. When there was a crisis, they appeared. When someone called for help, they came. When the fighting was done, they left without asking for thanks. Some species learned to trust them. Others never did. But everyone remembered the lesson of the precursors. If you attack humanity, they will not stop until you are gone. And everyone remembered the lesson of the Void Swarm. If you call for help, humanity will come. Even if it means dying. Admiral Vasquez retired after the battle for Station Prime. He spent his remaining years on the human homeworld, not Earth, which was still a poisoned tomb, but the new world they had built in the darkness of the quarantine zone. He raised flowers. He wrote poetry. He taught children to paint dawn every night. He listened to the communication frequencies, waiting for another distress call, waiting for another chance to prove that humanity could be more than weapons, more than monsters, more than the sum of their bloody history. He never stopped listening. None of them did, because somewhere in the galaxy, someone was always crying in the dark, and humanity would always answer.